RC specifically, I find myself doing 2 passages and then feeling tired. And I try to mix it up, like doing it in the morning, during the afternoon, during the evening. But regardless of what time I take it, I always feel drained. Is
I hear
there
you.
advice you have in terms of that?
What's your target test date?
March, but I don't mind pushing it back more.
Okay, so you've got some time. I would suggest building it up slowly. So you're doing 2 passages back to back.
Yes.
So next step could be 3 passages back to back and slowly build up doing the full 4 passage full reading comp section, and then adding in the other sections to create a full exam. Because the LSAT is a lot. It is grueling. Endurance is a big factor. You could also play with some exercises just to make reading comp in general a little bit easier for you too.
Okay.
And in terms of what those exercises might look like, I'm thinking about reading a passage and just extracting the main point and see how that goes in terms of helping you knock out those more general global questions.
Mm-hmm. And then alongside of RC, another thing is, since I've been at it for more than a year, like year and a half-ish, I feel like I've already done the most recent ones from the 70s or a little bit of the 60s all the way up to the 90s. So I'm having a hard time deciding which ones to do. Do I just go and do the ones all over, or do I do the ones that I haven't done, like go into the 30s and 40s and 50s that some of them don't have comparative passages like the new one does?
Yeah, I mean, you've got some time between now and March. So I think it's fine for you to go back and do some of the older exams and put some distance between you and the newest ones so that you could later redo some of those newer ones in the final few weeks before March. It doesn't matter that the older ones don't have the dual passages. There is so much else about them that's still relevant.
Okay. And going into LR, I find with LR, what I find to be most challenging is consistency, because I can score -4 multiple times on that section. But then there's other times where I drastically drop and I score like -10, -8. And so I find myself having these mistakes that I don't usually make. And that's just been a hard thing to control, regardless of
What kinds of mistakes?
review. Like I miss a certain word that's different in the answer choice. I end up confusing what an intermediate conclusion is with an actual conclusion. I end up sometimes just not realizing that it's not relevant to the stimulus, but I make these assumptions. And so those are the mistakes that I make sometimes when I'm scoring really low, like -10s, -8 on LR.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I would definitely review all of those in depth, because those kinds of mistakes are the mistakes that people make in LR. I mean,
Yeah.
it's good that you recognize them and see, okay, well, this is a pattern, or this is something that a mistake that I should not have made. Like, you get what the issue was, but that cuts across all LR questions, including tough ones. So I would review those in depth using the Socratic review method that I cover in the workshops in the course. I would definitely spend time there.
Yeah. So in terms of review, I have been doing that, I think, the Socratic review method, where I take it and then I take it untimed. So I look it over again, and then I review over the ones that I had most difficulties with, or the ones that I got wrong. And then I write it down. I wrote down the question, what type it is, which ones I found, like the answer choices, which one I found to be the ones that I was between, and why it's wrong, why the correct one is correct. And I sort of do that in like notebook. So does that sound like a good review so far? Should I implement something else into it?
That sounds like a good general framework. Do you find that you're getting value out of it?
Yeah.
Nice. Great. I'll send you a couple of workshops from the course just so that you can make sure you're doing the most comprehensive review possible. I've done a lot of demo classes where I kind of lay out what that process can look like. You might get some new insights to
Mhm.
apply.
And then for reading comp, going back to it, I've been reviewing over the videos and the method of going into from the global into the local. I found that to be helping me a lot. Whenever I'm drilling some RC, I've tried that method and I've been doing -1s consistently. So I think
Amazing.
that's helpful. Yeah.
That's great. I'm really glad to hear that. That's awesome. I can't ask for a better result than that.
Yeah. So far, so good. LG I have no real issues with. I'm always, well, consistently I'm scoring -0s. The only time I don't is when it's like a new setup, like this past circle game that I did, I scored like -4 on, um, just because I didn't know how to set it up, but now I know. So I think LG I'm not struggling on, but should I still implement that into some sort of study schedule? Or should I just
You'll
focus merely on RC and LR?
I would focus more on reading comp and logical reasoning. The games you'll still continue to encounter as you do full length practice tests, and that might be sufficient to keep your logic games fresh. It sounds like reasoning and reading comp are really where you want to devote more of your time.
Yeah. And like I just mentioned, study schedules. I'm having a difficult time sticking to them, just because I don't often know what to do. And so, any advice on that?
Have you seen the day by day plans in the course?
Yeah. And which is why I'm having difficulties understanding if I should do like the whole LG section. Because I already did most of the RC section, the days. So I'm just missing the LG and the LR now.
Yeah. Well, as we said, logic games, you may not need that time. So I would suggest
Yeah.
focusing more on the logical reasoning sections of that study plan at this point. But since, of course, you're obviously not starting from scratch on the LSAT, you don't need to take the study plan from the beginning. You can focus on the elements that you need to focus on. And then with additional time, you can take individual sections as well as full length exams. You've got 3 months, so you have plenty of time. And much of that will likely best be spent on sections, exams, and review. And
Okay.
particularly, like we talked about earlier, building up your endurance with reading comp sections and then with the exam as a whole. There's nothing, I don't think that you need to necessarily do a whole lot of drilling by type or reviewing the basics. I think if anything, it's more about just reviewing difficult problems.
Mm-hmm. Oh, another thing about RC. So come test day, I find myself to have all this adrenaline, so I'm able to keep up with RC on test day, but it's just when I'm practicing is when I have difficulties with endurance.
Well, that sounds like maybe it relates a little bit to focus, just because test day, it's the real thing. So
Mhm.
you couldn't possibly look away. But when it's not the real thing, maybe attention can wander a little bit. Does that sound like what might be going on?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So, I mean, I think part of it is tracking your results. If you track your results more, maybe you'll be a bit more invested. And I would also think about, this is a separate thing, but adding in experimental sections and then separately tallying the results for your experimental sections so that you also can place importance on them and get yourself a score out of 180 on those too, just to have a
Okay.
bit more skin in the game there.
Yeah. So right now I'm scoring mid 160s. On this past November, I scored 163. My goal is to get like 170s. I think with a 170 exact, I'd be good. But my dream goal is like a 173 or a 172. Would that be realistic goal to reach by March, or should I push it back to April?
It's realistic. You've got 3 months. You can make anything happen during that time, especially given how well you're doing already. I would say go forward with March as your goal. And then if your results aren't where you want them to be on practice tests as March rolls around, you can always go for April instead or in addition. And I'm guessing that, are you looking to apply in the fall for next cycle?
Yeah, I was gonna apply this cycle, but I didn't reach the goal I wanted in November, so I just delayed it another year, which I don't mind.
Yeah, it's okay. I mean, you're not in a hurry. So I'd
Yeah.
say go for March. You could also register for April as a backup and then potentially do both or postpone to April if you need. But I would go forward with March as your goal right now.
Okay. And for practice test, when I take like the full length, um, would you suggest taking it? Because I have extra time, I have 50% accommodation. Would you suggest taking it by sections so I don't burn myself out when I'm taking these practice tests? Or do you suggest just going all out and doing it right away? Because I usually do a blind review after I've taken the timed version. Um, so what do you suggest in terms of that?
I would suggest building up gradually, since you mentioned endurance on reading comp, for example, is a bit tough. There's no rush to get into full length exams, especially since an exam with extra time becomes even longer. So
Mhm.
that's a lot. So I would build up gradually. There's no reason to jump right into it if you don't need to. But I would get there. I would definitely make sure that you get at least 10 exams under your belt with the realistic timing of the 53 minutes per section.
Mhm. Okay. I think you've answered most of my worries.
Awesome. Well, I'm glad to help. Of course, it was great to meet you. If you need anything at all moving forward between now and March, just reach out. I'm happy to help.
Of course. Thank you so much.
Thanks for tuning into the show. Please subscribe if you haven't done so already to be notified of new episodes as I release them. And feel free to reach out if you need anything at all as you move forward with your prep. I'm happy to help however I can. In the meantime, I'll wish you all the best and take care.